So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. And I'm really pleased to be hosting this webinar with Shirley Thompson on coaching in a skilled agile framework. So throughout the session, feel free to send your questions in the chat box, and I and Shirley would spend some time making sure that we've been able to answer your questions. Yeah. And you would also have the opportunity to share on polls. We would like to know who is attending and your views on the entire webinar. Yeah. So a quick intro of Shirley. Shirley is a professional coach. She leads organizations going through transformation, and she's passionate about supporting busy achievers work on what is meaningful to them and to help organizations to improve their collaborative working. Her background is in information technology, hardware, and she's been a project manager and worked in transformation, and she's just successfully obtained her PhD. She'll be sharing parts of her PhD in this particular presentation. 3 things I would like you to remember about Shirley whilst you go through the webinar is she's a distinguished Toastmaster, a new grandmother, and she's presented on hundreds of webinars. So I would like to hand over the stage to Shirley, and I look forward to hearing more. Shirley?
Thank you, William. You make me laugh. It's a very flattering introduction. Thank you. I'm not going to say I've done hundreds of webinars, but I've probably done loads of talks at one way or another. So thank you very much. And I'd like to echo William's welcome. Thank you all for joining. And also his encouragement for you to use the chat box. We would really like this to be a conversation as much as possible. I have an aim today, and that is to, as presenter, I want to persuade you to adopt the idea that the main intention of an agile coaching culture is effective communications. I believe this perspective can help people change, and agile culture is all about people and mindset. I want to support agile's transformation on the way people work. I believe coaching has embraced an understanding of soft skills that is far better than any other discipline like management or leadership. It's really got to understand what soft skills are all about. So I want to support anyone that uses those skills and to develop them and improve their work. So my aim is something you might not agree with. So I've put a question mark. You may not be persuaded, and that's fine because everyone's entitled to their own view. But let's share ideas. That's what I'm about. Let's talk about our viewpoints. I'm very much a pragmatist who believes that communities working out together what works in practice is a valid theory of what is right. Right, I'm here because of my research. So what I'd like to do quickly before we moved on to the agenda is to explain my research so you know where I'm coming from. So this was a doctorate in coaching and mentoring, and my main aim was to show the benefits of coaching to coaches. So it's a bit unusual. It was a small study, and I used 7 project managers as participants. That means they were leaders of teams or groups of people. And these leaders, let's call them leaders, they demonstrated that they benefited at work from having done some coaching practice. So I made them act as coaches for just 6 coaching sessions after having one day's coach training. Now they'd spread these 6 sessions over 6 months, and the person that they coached was another professional, very similar to themselves, maybe more experienced or less experienced. It was all potluck, but in a similar field, doing similar work. And they acted as a novice coach, and these people that volunteered themselves were prepared, agreed to be coached by a novice coach and work on real issues they were facing at work. Now, for these leaders, my main participants who did the work, did the coaching, I interviewed them about their coaching practice, and I also interviewed them about what happened at work. And the exciting thing was that they actually changed their behaviour at work. No one asked them to, they weren't expected to coach at work, but nevertheless, through having had the coaching practice, that they actually changed their behaviour in their normal work environment. And I was really excited by my research because fairness is one of my values. I see no reason why coaches should have all the benefits of that coach training and the coaching that they do. And these skills that these leaders took into work are very much the skills anyone has to use in collaboration. So in summary, my participants learned how to use soft skills better at work as a result of coaching practice. And it's their findings that I'm presenting today, and I will refer to it throughout. But let's go to the agenda. So as I've said, I'm going to try and persuade you why effective communications is a good stance to take as to what Agile Coaching Culture is all about. And then I'm going to invite you to address your fears or challenges with that position, or indeed the fears and challenges you face with Agile Coaching Culture right now. And then I'm going to be very much using a coaching style, I hope, to facilitate your thoughts, get you to think, and hopefully go on and challenge you a little bit to reflect a little bit more than your current thinking. And then we're going to wrap up in a very coaching fashion and try and think of some actions that we might take as a result. So I hope that's acceptable to everyone. As I say, any thoughts you have, please write in the chat box. But I think, William, you have a poll that you'd like to take at this stage. But you have to be off mute. Oh, here's the poll. So I think everyone can see the poll now.
So I'm going to end the poll. Currently, we have 40% consultants, 20% software developers, and 40% member of Agile Safe Environment. So we've got a good spread of attendees, and it's going to be interesting for today.
Great, that's just what you wanted, William. So that's fab. Okay, so I've made my agenda really clear, but what I'd like to know is what your intentions are. And so if you can share what you'd like to get out, what you're intending to get out of this webinar by joining it, that would be really good, if you can, that is, or just any expectations you have. I think that would be very helpful to William and I going forwards, particularly, and perhaps also to get us into the discussion at the end. We'll definitely be trying to leave 15 minutes at the end for your questions and discussion about the topic. So if you could enter anything into the chat box now, this is your opportunity.
Yes, we've got improved agile processes from Michael Platt.
Well, hi, Michael. That sounds great. I'm definitely be talking about people today. I'm not sure people are a process, but we'll see how that goes. Yeah, introducing a coaching culture, great. Yeah, introductions. Yeah, getting started and keeping momentum going, I'm sure is a nice challenge for everyone. Okay, well, keep them coming. I'm going to press on so that we make sure we've got time later. So here's my pitch then, to try and persuade you that the intention of a coaching culture, of an agile coaching culture, is effective communications. And I'm saying that because of my study where these leaders said, okay, I practice some coaching, what I'm ending up doing is becoming a much more effective communicator. That was their bottom line findings. So three words here: agile, coaching, and culture. 3 English words. No real definition, except perhaps you could look in a dictionary, but you know, dictionaries, people just use English words as well, and so people interpret what these 3 words mean. So let's take a look at each of these 3 words and see if we can agree on meaning. So I'm going to start with culture. So in my view, culture is all about shared feelings and thoughts. So we're all familiar with human cultures, aren't we? We know the difference between life in a big city, as this picture shows, and life in a rural community, say, or life in different countries. There's a different feel about these different places. And we know we've evolved our cultures over thousands of years. I've recently been reading the work of Antonio Damasio, who argues that the human mind has evolved from nervous systems that have evolved from basic organisms, which is quite an interesting thought. He explains how small organisms can detect chemical differences between the insides of a cell, how we personally feel, and the outsides, and how they know whether the environment is good or bad for them. So he interprets that as feelings. So although it's chemical, there's a sense that organisms have feelings, and it's those things that have evolved into our feelings today. He also argues that social insects work together in groups really effectively, even making changes according to the environment. And obviously you can see that with ants. They change their intentions, and they even change what they do in their everyday activities. As members of organisations and as humans, you may prefer Shine's view that culture is about shared basic assumptions, and you can learn them in a group, and you might even teach them to people. So with current organisations, you know, they have mission statements, they have values for everyone to understand. They have kind of aims that are consistent, kind of golden thread from the top to the bottom of the organisation. So maybe cultures can be built top down. I personally believe there's a mixture going on here, and cultures come from feelings and thoughts. And so there's a sense that cultures are built bottom up. And there's a certain inevitability of that. You can't just direct a culture in a certain way. It has to be kind of absorbed by the people that are part of this culture. But let's see what you think. What would your definition of culture be? How would you define it beyond effective communication?
So Shirley, I'm going to launch the next poll.
Okay, yeah, let's have a poll. That'd be great.
And people can also send text about their views on culture.
No.
Okay, I've launched a poll on culture. So I'm going to end the polling now. And so we had 60% say all of the above, and we had 20% saying promoting good examples, and 20% saying talking to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the talking to people is obviously communication. The modeling of things might not be communication. You know, you might pick things up with silent observation. Now, whether that you class that as communication, I don't know. But I am definitely of the view that culture's emergent, and it's a result of what happens amongst people. So, as I say, I encourage you to write anything in the chat box as it occurs to you. So that was trying to persuade you that culture's about effective communication. Now we come to my research and explain that coaching's about effective communication. And if you just think of the competencies of a coach, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with coaching because you know about Agile. Different training organizations focus accreditations on competencies lists. Now, these authors have written an academic paper on reverse engineering the competencies from the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, and they've reverse engineered those into a set of soft skills, and they've grouped them as communication skills, relating skills, and facilitation skills. So these are the skills of a coach, the soft skills of a coach, if you like. Now, I'm sure you're going to think, well, that's not surprising. Firstly, coaching's a conversation. Secondly, it's an agreed relationship. You can't possibly coach someone if they don't want to be coached. And thirdly, you're encouraging the coachee to change or to learn something or to take some different action. So that's obvious, isn't it? Maybe it isn't obvious to everyone. For me, this is clearly all about communication with some kind of intention. And this came out clearly in my research. So I would say coaching is a philosophical use of soft skills. So you use communication skills, you use relating skills, and you have some intentions in mind of the things you're trying to facilitate for. So I'm going to show you a diagram now that is quite complicated, but it's come out of my thesis, and I want you to concentrate on the center of it, which are 3 concentric rings. In the center are thinking skills. So this is where you're going to choose what you're going to do. Feelings come into this as well, but this is where this is your mind, this is all your decision making. The next layer, which used to be purple in my thesis, it's a bit pale on these slides. This is the effective communication layer. And the reason I've merged communication and relating skills is that my participants could not tell the difference between communication, relating, and actually self-management as well. So this effective communication layer contains all 3. So things like self-management, if you're going to really listen to somebody with good intention, you have to manage yourself to shut everything else out. And we know leaders are doing a million things at once, but they had to, when they were coaching, they had to focus their mind and give 100% attention. They said that was the biggest thing they learned. So there's self-management, there's also the communication skills themselves. So the listening, you really have to pay attention, but also listen in the sense of hearing what's not said. That's what these participants kept saying to me. Oh yeah, we can hear what people are not saying as well. So maybe that's because they increased their attention to focus in on what the person was saying. But also because they were listening, they found that actually other people spoke more, gave more information. And then they also realized that to get a connection and to get coaching to happen, they had to build a relationship that did have enough trust to actually do the contracting. And also they had to build respect for one another, have a conversation, get to know one another, and also build the rapport they needed to get to enough of a relationship that they could coach in the first place. So this was their coaching practice. I introduced them to this person they had to coach and then left them to it to organize. So, and they had to do all that work to create a space to be able to coach. And it was that they took into their work, because they were much more attentive to people and found that a good response. So that's that layer, effective communication. Once you do that with soft skills, you can see that anything outside of communication is all about intention. So even if you look in the literature, you can find lots of soft skills lists, huge numbers of them, all with about 100 skills or more on. But if you look at all of them, take out effective communication, and you get things like coaching, collaborating, directing, supporting, social. These are really intentions that you have for you and the other person, for what kind of relationship you're going to build. So if you want a social relationship with someone, you're going to be very friendly, and you'll have an intention that the other person's going to be friendly to you. If you want to direct somebody, maybe you need them to, you know, there's an emergency, you need to do something, you're going to be very short, use short, simple words. You're going to raise your voice. You're going to get people to call an ambulance or get out because of fire. Collaborating, you're going to have to do some give and take. So there's going to be an intention of sharing what you're doing together. So I hope this is explaining how coaching for me is very much effective communications in the sense of skills, but in your mind you've also got some intentions for the other person and your relationship together. So I hope that's clear. Let's find out what your thoughts on coaching, and we'll have that poll back, William, I guess.
Okay, I'm launching the poll back, relaunching the poll.
So here's what. So how would you define coaching beyond effective communication?
So I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. So where we've got more interest is looking at supporting and engagement. And then we've also got a few people clicking on mentoring. A question we've got currently in the chat box is, what's the difference between mentoring and coaching? And I know you'll be covering it later. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's just cover that now, because like most things, you know, mentoring is another English word that's been interpreted in many different ways. But I can give a quick answer to that. So my view is that coaching is about pulling information from the other person. So you're asking questions to open up someone else's thinking. With mentoring, you might do that. You might do some coaching some of the time, but there's definitely time when you give advice, and you're trying to give someone the benefit of your experience. So coaches try not to do that. Obviously, they can share things as well occasionally, but I would say coaches share advice less often, because their main job is to open up someone else's thinking and get them to learn. And most adults learn best by themselves. So I'm sure that will be interesting, but it's great that lots of people have said supporting and engagement, because I think that is about talking to people and encouraging them. So there's a lot of communication going on with that. Great. Okay, so I'm going to move on to why Agile is effective communication. And I think William has something to say on this. I am just going to say that I've read lots and lots about Agile. I've talked to lots of people, and it all seems to be about people. All right, that's the message. So, William, would you like to use your slide and talk to the scaled Agile framework?
Thank you, Shirley. So within the scaled Agile framework, it's looking at teams and big teams. So when it comes to small teams. We still need someone who will be coaching the teams, and we've got a Scrum Master acting as a team coach. Some teams have also got an extra person who's acting as a coach to ensure that teams are coached in their practices. So some teams have a technical coach, and they also have a process coach to coach them throughout all the process. And then we've got program layer where the release train engineer or the chief Scrum Master helps with coaching all the teams on their skilled agile adoption journey. And during the skilled agile adoption journey, we've got the Lean Agile Center of Excellence that acts as a coach for the entire organization to ensure that the organization is adopting the framework in the right format and people are joining on the journey. We've got the large solution and the portfolio layer. In all these layers, we need someone who would coach the teams and guide them. Hence, Shirley's presentation today. So I'm quite intrigued on all the topics Shirley has covered so far, and there'll be a separate webinar on the Skilled Agile Framework. But for now, we would like to hear more on coaching to support effective communication. And I know what Shirley will be touching on, will be touching back on the framework. So Shirley, I would like to hand over back to you.
Great. Okay. So I see Mike has put something on about mentoring coaching. Let's come back to that later, certainly in the question area, because I know it's can be a contentious issue for people. So I hope I've convinced you. Again, please write in the chat box if you think Agile Coaching Culture is more than effective communication, because I'm going to use that position right now. Obviously, I've read why people want to do Agile Coaching Cultures, and I really like this book, Pixton, Nicolaisen and Gibson, maybe because I used to work with Paul Gibson in the past, many moons ago. But this book is very much about the trust between people in order to get to a productive environment, increase engagement and contribution from people. And the idea is that, in this book, is that you get increased productivity by letting enthusiastic people use their natural energy to creatively solve issues rather than allowing them to wait to be told. So that proactiveness is encouraging them to get engaged and to contribute. So my research talked a little bit about related to contribution and engagement. I can't say I proved productivity, although the participants felt that they were more effective in their role as a result of being more supportive or collaborative to other people. But anyway, we've moved to the second part of the agenda now to think about what might go wrong. So we can dream and have these great intentions, productivity, engagement, contribution, but what actually can go wrong? What gets in our way? So if you've got some ideas about what gets in our way, please write them in the chat box. What my position, so some fears that I hear all the time: oh, it's a huge investment, you don't know what the return's going to be. Actually, we've done all this stuff and we're not productive. We've been in turmoil for months. The project managers amongst you will say, oh, I don't know what the risks are. Or the people sensitive might say, well, the people aren't ready for this. You know, this is new to them. So it'll be interesting to know whether you've got other fears. So again, please add them to the chat box. That would be great. So my intention for this webinar is to challenge you with the idea that instead of worrying about productivity, engagement and contribution, which are quite abstract and hard to get your mind around how it's going to work, I'm suggesting that we just say, right, let's set our intention to be effective communication. That's something we can get our mind around, perhaps. You know, we're all communicating all the time. We know what's We know in our heart and our gut what's effective and what isn't. If we go with that, then the blockages that are going to get in our way are the people. So we can think what's happening with the people. We can think about the message between the people, messages that people are giving one another. And perhaps we can think about the intentions we've got behind what is actually being said. So going back to my research then, using coaching skills, these are the findings. I'm presenting what these participants said. They felt they were much more supportive at work, and they took this idea that if they gave more attention, if they really listened carefully, then what they got was more information back. So in status meetings, everyone was sharing and contributing a lot more than they had been before. So if you like, they set an intention for contribution in a way, which relates back to those three official Agile aims. So they set an intention for that and acted accordingly. So giving more attention, really listening and valuing what people were saying. They also took from the coaching that they would give people responsibility, and they seemed to take permission from coaching in a sense of, when the team's got a problem, we're going to tell them it's their problem and it's not my problem. So they actually shifted where responsibility lay for some of the issues. Now, you know, maybe you do that in Agile already, but just getting started, that might be a hang up. That's not something we're uncomfortable about doing, is saying, right, you own this issue. Go and see if you can sort this out. Alternatively, another way is to fall back on being supportive and ask lots of questions. So I think this is about learning to take that step to empower people, but also stepping in to be helpful when you can. So they set an intention, if you like, these leaders, to empower other people where they could. And obviously they got a sense for who was up for doing that, and let them try to solve their own issues and then step in when someone asks for help or obviously needed help. So in the situation where someone accepts responsibility, there's a little bit of a shift in terms of the weight on the leader's shoulders, because now they think, oh, well, I'm actually sharing some of the responsibilities and issues that I've got. So they actually felt they were more collaborative because things were being shared around. And in those situations where you do delegate, it's much easier to coach, because then you've got a topic on which you agree that some coaching would be helpful, because I'm taking on this responsibility, it's new to me, and yes, I could do with some help. So there's a kind of willingness on both sides to take the coaching stance. So another way of saying this, and I think this is where it became obvious to me that the leaders were intending different things with different people in different situations. The intentions in their mind became really obvious. So from what I've just said, if you take this diagram, colleague A, colleague B, colleague C might be teams, but in the supportive relationship at the bottom, there's a sense where we're all working on these known work goals, we're going to support each other, and we're going to listen to one another. We know what we're trying to do, but we're all working together, we're all contributing, and there's value. Those contributions that we're making are being valued, so people care that we're actually participating. Once you get into an empowerment situation or responsibility is shifting, then you get into this more collaborative kind of style of working. Coaching becomes more possible when people accept that that's what's happening. So although I've shown three distinct three distinct arrows, because there is a difference. There's actually a kind of more of an analog movement between these. So depending on what kind of response you get, you can shift what your intentions are. And this becomes even easier. Sorry, I'm going to, another way of saying this, let me put this slide in. Another way of saying this is to encourage you to think about heart and head. And I'm going to go back to my previous diagram in a minute to explain it. But the intentions that we have are very much in our head. So we know what our intentions are, or at least we can search for them, we can think about them. But as well as the head going on, there's also this, the heart's in play as well. So relationships matter in these decisions about whether we support or whether we try and give people more responsibility. And we need to be conscious of that. So the questions you might ask, and this becomes clear with that three concentric rings diagram again, if we draw them for two people, now you can really ask, what's agreed between us? So you have intentions, I have intentions, but what do we actually agree on? So you can actually explore that. And then you can also explore what kind of relationship you've got, what's going on in that effective communication layer. So it's not only what quality of the relationship is, but also how are we actually talking. So let's find out which of your fears are not addressed by effective communication.
So currently, we've got Michael sharing some very interesting comments. One of the comments, most projects are work unfilled due to lack of skills. Empowering and delegating to an idiot doesn't work. And
exactly.
We hope that whilst he's recruiting people, he's considering the people coming in and recruiting the right resources. Any additions, Shirley?
Well, fears.
Okay.
Let me think. My mind's not gone blank because I was kind of expecting more fears from other people. I think the fears I'm hearing is that it's just don't know how to get started, don't know how to make it work, and this is why, you know, we give training to the leaders and think the leaders can make it work. I think what I'm trying to say is you can't make things work on your own. A culture is being built by the group of people that you've got. So somehow the skills, as Michael says, somehow the skills have to be ingrained in everyone in order to adopt the culture that you're desiring. So if you want people to work together in this kind of open, collaborative way, then they need to be able to speak to one another in a very clear way. And hopefully they're not all idiots. But I agree, you know, what's an idiot? You know, an idiot quite often is someone that doesn't fit in the environment that they're in. They're not necessarily an idiot in another environment that they're in. So it's all about perspective. And I think what I'm trying to say is that coaching, the understanding of what coaching does, is that these leaders were given the coaching practice. What they took from that, you know, they went into a supportive state with somebody in order to help them, which was unusual for them. They couldn't give advice. That was the main premise, not to give advice, and they just had to ask questions, and they really had to get into the mindset of the other person. And that's what they were taking into work, that they couldn't just sit in their own perspectives. They had to go and sit in other people's perspectives and make sure they understood that. So there was a relationship available for open communication, more open understanding. And we all know if you've got a really good relationship, you can give open and honest feedback. And I think when you're working together, you need to be able to do that. So I'm going to move on to actions now, because these are the 3 simple actions that William and I have come up with. And again, you might not agree, but we need to get into the discussion, I think. So we've come up with 3. So start a coaching culture. So, and get into this mindset that it is about people, it is about communicating really well. Growing, maybe it's a skill issue. You really have to worry and educate everybody on soft skills, because otherwise people just think they've got them, and actually soft skills grow over a lifetime, and you might set some measures. So let's just see. Start a coaching culture. I'm saying, well, how about just promoting effective communication as an initial step? What would that do for you? Support everyone on their work goals and listen well. That's the basic underlying, the bottom line, if you like. So by doing that, you're encouraging contribution, and then you'd need to value everyone's contributions, all right, so that they learn from what they're saying. Yes, other people in the group might say that's not a good idea, but still it's an idea and it might be useful later. So somehow there needs to be some positive response to all contributions. And then next thing is to empower where you can. So start shifting responsibility to people that are able to hold this supportive culture that you're encouraging. So, you know, the people that are also listening well and helping other people to contribute, they're the ones you need to be supporting to empower. And so they will empower others. Grow your skills, yes, please. William and I are planning another webinar. Can't tell you when, but we'd definitely like to have to educate people more on these listening and questioning skills. Encourage the team to join. So I'm very much of the opinion that everyone needs to understand these soft skills in order to communicate more effectively. And then share practice. So it's tell people what you're doing and encourage other people to do the same. So basic listening skills are easy for everyone to practice. And finally, you could set some KPIs, and these are just some simple ones. Who's had training? So just think, well, what soft skills training shall we do? You could evaluate the listening in the group. Just ask yourself, you know, how good a job do you listen yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? What would take it one step further? And then another one is to evaluate, ask everyone how they feel they're being listened to. And that's always interesting on a scale of 1 to 10, and what it would take to get that up to another level, even up to 10, maybe. So, if nothing else, my main message is take time to reflect on the effectiveness of your own communication and your own relationships. Please. So I'm up for questions, William. So I leave it to you to handle those.
Thank you, Shirley. And thank you so much for the presentation and all the insights you've shared. And we are going to be taking some questions, and they'll be coming through the chat box, and we'll be answering them as we go along. But I think Jerry has made a comment which I would like to share. He says he prefers to work with a change manager to agree a strategy for change in cultural mindset, using games in context to present scenarios, to open up ideas and feedback. And that leads to one of the questions I've always had on my mind whilst you were presenting. Who should start the coaching culture in the organization?
Well, I guess if you've decided that you're going to run with an agile coaching culture, then someone has decided that already. So they are leading that. so in that sense of building the business case and saying we're going to use that process, so then it becomes asking all the leaders to make it happen, I guess. So it's inevitable that that's top down. I personally would encourage people to explain the coaching culture a lot better, because it seems like, if we're not careful, the Agile process makes the culture work by magic. Just by following the Agile process, it's all going to work. And I don't think that's correct. So Agile is a process, but it's also about people, and people are unpredictable. So we have to find a way of how we're actually going to work together. So this idea of Jerry's to get people together and work on things together, that's an opportunity for practicing the soft skills in a sense. So it is a coaching style, I would say, and encouraging people into that coaching style. I would just prefer that they knew that's what was happening to them, because I think if people know what's happening to them, that's the end goal. If they know the intentions, they're more likely to participate rather than just go to a meeting that someone says is fun or whatever, or is good for you or whatever. I think people need to know where they're headed, and then they participate and contribute more.
Thank you, Shirley. Whilst we await some other, more questions, I also have another question, which is, what if the leader who's encouraging this entire coaching culture moves on? Should we just then pass it on to someone within the organization to lead on the coaching culture? What would be your recommendations for that? Because I know in the skilled Agile practice, we've got communities of practice which encourage such activities to continue. What would be your recommendations for such organizations who adopt a coaching culture?
I'm not quite sure where you're coming from on that one. I think you mean, the leader's got the skills and the other people don't necessarily know the skills. So the danger is if they move on, then everything collapses. I think that's true, and that's why I'm very, very keen on the idea that more people know what's happening and how it works. So I think if you're talking about centre of excellence or a shared practice, then actually that's a good idea to spread the knowledge early. So definitely sharing practice in all forms, I think it's good to keep the ideas and the knowledge bubbling, so everyone's got a handle on it. Otherwise, you're right. If one person's championing, but others don't understand it, it will fall by the wayside when they leave. If they get fed up, and everyone gets fed up if they're the only person trying to drive a particular message. You need support. All leaders need followers. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it's answered the question, and it's just ensuring that the key person who drives such an initiative, if they move on, there's someone there to make sure that does not fall off. Yeah.
I think you've told me in the past that there are ideas about having centres of excellence outside organisations available, so that that could support people who are trying to champion inside an organisation. There's somewhere outside they could go.
Yeah, and Jerry has also says he likes the proposition of a coaching community of practice, which skilled Agile does support, and I think it lines up with your answer. Let's get more people into the coaching culture, and things will not fall through the cracks.
Yeah. I think my main message is that anyone can use coaching skills. So it's not a leader privilege, in my view. I know that's a bit different to most people, But I think the coach is getting too many benefits, and actually to step into a coaching environment, even in a one-to-one situation outside of Agile, the coachee does need a certain set of soft skills in order to step into a coaching space. And so I think it's good to find ways of enabling people to recognize what is good communication, what a good relationship is, so that you can have that open and honest feedback.
Thank you, Shirley. We've got a question or an addition from Michael. He says, people need to have a common vision and understanding. Communication is a key part of this, but so is knowledge and leadership and additional, etc., which I totally agree to. We've got a meeting who's saying, what could be early messages, warnings, visible indicators that might mean that agile transformation is inadequate in organizations that have undertaken the agile transformation journey? And I think one thing Shirley has reflected on in this entire discussion is communication. Where there's poor communication about the vision, the mission, why we are on this journey, and in an agile transformation as well, we want leadership support in the entire transformation. In a skilled agile environment, we've got meetings like the PI planning and the communities of practice and other activities that support organizations on this journey. So I think for such indicators, we expect that organizations at the start should have defined what are success criteria and what are certain failure criteria they want to look at. Shirley, have you got any additions to Minton's question on visible indicators around coaching?
Well, I think there could be lots of things you could do to see how people feel about the coaching culture. I just think a lot of this stuff is taken for granted. This is a trouble. Quite often coaching is accepted, but not really paid heed to. So in a sense, the leaders try and coach people without actually making it obvious that is what's happening. And so their resentment can build in that. I think that's one of the dangers. And so I'm very keen that in autonomous teams, everything is open and above board, and everyone knows where they're at. You know, everyone is equal. There should be adult to adult conversations at all times. Otherwise, things are going to start going awry. So I think as long as you're monitoring how teams work, that's great. I mean, in the scaled diagram, there's huge numbers of communication paths, and I don't know enough about all those ones to know whether you could, whether you see those as coaching ones or not. And I think that's part of the problem. You know, maybe it's a communication line, so you just take it for granted rather than think, actually, the coaching culture is happening here, and can we have an adult to adult conversation in across these boundaries? I think that would be a nice conversation to have. So it comes down to really understanding what coaching culture really means. And for me, it's definitely an equal adult conversation. People enter into dialogue with complete respect, let's say, for each other's position, and so you can have an honest conversation. And that might be a pipe dream. That might sound like a pipe dream, and maybe it's not ever possible in reality in 100%. But actually, I think that's the intention we need to have. That's certainly the intention when I'm a coach, I step into that space to support the other person to learn, and that's my main intention. I don't have I just want to help that person. Do you know what I mean? So I will make my observations in tune with their thinking. So I'm not coming from my space. I'm actually coming from where they're at and trying to help them with their thinking. So I think there's a lack of understanding of coaching generally everywhere, and I know Agile coaching is slightly different, but that still means that people need to understand it very clearly, what's going on and how it works, because once you understand how it works, then you can use it better.
Yeah. And Jerry adds, at times the cause of indicators that might mean that the agile transformation is inadequate can be separate from coaching. It may mean that there's a lack of an executive leader who's intimately engaged and actively promoting the transformation. Yeah, I agree with what Jerry's added. If we don't have any other questions, our time is almost up. Sherry, have you got any additions?
No, I just thank everybody for their ideas in the chat box. I'll certainly go and have a look at some of those links, and if there's any way I can help, or if anyone wants to follow up and ask me questions later, they're very welcome to. I just value everyone's opinions, because I think this is really, really important. I know there was an article in the Times last week, someone said wasn't very positive about Agile, but I think we all in 21st century need to work a little bit more closely together and get into not compromise, but understanding one another a lot more. So I think it's really, really important. And everyone aspires to do it. It's just making it happen that's the challenge.
Okay, I think we've got a question from Pascal, but we'll get in touch with Pascal with this question. How do you enable transformation at best in remote teams? But I would like to say thank you, Dr. Shirley Thompson, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar on coaching in a skilled Agile framework environment that drives effective communications. If you have any other questions, please contact me at info@leanicontechnology.co.uk. And once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate if you would complete that and provide us with feedback. In the next 48 hours, we'll send you a link to view the recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Lean Technology and a big thank you to Shirley, I'd like to say thank you everyone and have a great rest of the day. Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you, William. Thanks, everybody. Bye.